My guest today is the author of the 1111 Matrix Code. He is an experiencer of a unique collection of synchronicities. He's also a researcher into numerology, and I'll let him go into the rest. That's all I'll say for now. Garrick King, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to let you kind of take it away, but I will say this. Synchronicities are something I'm always interested in. I'm
Yeah.
a believer that there is a real phenomenon here. And for me, in 2020 and 2021, that sort of began a series of strange and mystical events for me. I still haven't completely sorted through the meaning of it all yet. And if I didn't have three book ideas already, I'd say it's going to be a book, but I don't know. We'll see. But feel free to share this stuff as if you're talking to an old friend because I already believe I've had my share of paranormal experiences on and off my whole life. And I'll just add this too. I know last night I happened to look at my phone right at 11 or 111. So I was like, "Oh, here we go."
It's interesting because it's it was about a week or so ago. I was listening to your podcast and I picked up my phone and looked, and the time was exactly 11:11. And I took a screenshot of it. I was going to send it to you, but then I thought, the more I do that, people are going to think I
Hmm.
timed that to do it.
Hmm.
I didn't. I just picked it up the phone and looked, and I was like, okay, here we go again.
I know what you mean. There, this just happened to me last week. I was talking to a podcaster friend of mine, and I was telling her about something that just happened to me. I just saw a weird little apparition in my neighbor's yard. And it kind of tied into the conversation we were having, but I went back and I deleted the message because
Oh,
I didn't want to overdo it with the experiences. I'm
yeah.
always conscious of that. I've
Yeah.
got tons of experiences that I haven't even told on my own podcast because I don't want to look, I don't know. Do you know what I'm saying? I want to be credible.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. Because that's one of the big things with, this whole journey that I've been on. I've had people, in fact, I had one guy in particular come after me in the worst way, claiming that I was a government shill. Um, I mean, he was like just going hard and heavy, saying that I went so far as to legally change my name to match that of a comic book character. And I mean, it's just ridiculous stuff. It's like, I don't know what to tell you, man, because my parents are the ones that gave me my
Yeah.
name, you know? And I mean,
I
he
know what
just,
you mean. I know this is a thing that happens not just to you. Anytime anybody releases UFO footage, Bigfoot footage, or anything out of the norm like that, they get attacked. People come out of the woodwork screaming hoax automatically.
yep, yep.
That's been a big reason why I've held back on a lot of my experiences too. And also, I think too, it's if it's not pertinent to the story I'm telling or the story I'm in the middle of telling, I'll just kind of let it happen organically. But I've got Bigfoot stories and UFO stories that I haven't even talked about yet because we're
Wow.
in this culture of people screaming hoax.
Yeah. Well, and it's getting worse with AI. Um,
Hmm.
it's becoming easier and easier to fake these things. And it's going to get to a point where you're really not going to know if what you're seeing is real or not. And I mean, and you're going to get those people screaming hoax, hoax, hoax. And I think it's gonna keep happening, and
Hmm.
it sucks, but it is what
Yeah,
it.
it's a strange road we're headed down with this whole AI thing. I've thought about that too. It's like if you have footage right now that you're sitting on, now might be the time to release that because in a couple years or maybe even a couple of months, we're going to hit a point where everything is going to be looked at like AI.
Mhm.
people are going to become, they're going to grow increasingly more skeptical of just normal pictures. People are going to start to, it's going to be a thing that we're going to have to deal with in our lifetime, is parsing through what's real and what's not. And people are going to default to, oh, it's just AI very soon. Some
Oh yeah.
people have already.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've seen it. I've seen it in Facebook, Instagram, people posting images of, UFOs, whatever. And you read the comments, and lo and behold, there'll be somebody in there saying, "Oh, great AI," or "This is AI."
Yeah.
I mean, it's just
Yeah.
straight out of the gate.
Yeah.
Straight.
Straight out of the gate. I'm going to let you have the floor. Where did all this begin for you?
Well, it started. Well, let me just kind of start off by saying that my entire life I have had paranormal experiences. I mean, since the age of 3 or 4. So when all of this kind of started, it was strange. It was interesting, but I'm also a skeptic at the same time. So, as I go through this, I'll kind of explain, my thought process when everything first started. But it really began in 2009 in January. I just, for whatever reason, I just started waking up at 3:33 in the morning. And when the first night it happened, I mean, it was just like it was no big deal. I woke up, looked at the clock, saw that it was 3:33, was like, okay, great, I have extra time to sleep. Rolled over, went back to bed. Um, and then the second night, I woke up and looked at the clock, and it was the exact same time. And I thought, okay, well, that's odd, but I really didn't put much thought into it. And at this particular time, that number 3:33 meant nothing to me. Nothing. I mean, I didn't know anything about, the witching hour and, and all this, sort of stuff. So the third night, I wake up, look at the clock. It's 3:33. And I'm like, okay, this is odd. Like, what's going on? But gradually fell back asleep. The fourth night I woke up, it was 3:33 when I looked at the clock. And let me just state very clearly, I know how ridiculous this is going to sound, but it's absolutely the truth. This happened every single night from January until November. Every single night, except for one. And this one particular night, I actually set my alarm for 3:15 so that I could be awake when the clock struck 3:33. Because in my mind, in the very beginning, my thought process is something is happening
Hmm.
at this time and it's waking me up.
Hmm.
I don't know if it's, I went through so many different thought processes. At this time, I lived with roommates, and I thought, okay, are they getting up in the middle of the night, maybe going to the restroom? But strange, that they would be on this consistent clock of going to the restroom at the exact same time every single night. I thought maybe it was the ice maker dumping ice, which, it had never woke me up before, but I'm just trying to rationalize like where, what's causing this.
Hmm.
Um, I even thought maybe like that I had a watch, and for some reason, I don't know why I would ever set an alarm for 3:33 a.m.,
Hmm.
but that maybe there was a watch I had stuck in a drawer somewhere and it was going off, but then you would think, well, I would still hear it after I woke up. I mean, I just went through every single thing I could think of. But that particular night, I set the alarm for 3:15, woke myself up, sat there patiently waited for 3:33 to roll around. When the clock struck 3:33, the house was dead quiet. There was nothing going on. And I was like, this is so weird. And the other odd thing was, because I'm thinking something in the house. Well, if I went and visited my parents and stayed the night or the weekend with them, or at this particular time, my husband and I weren't married. We were still dating, and I would go and visit him on the weekends because he lived in Miami, Oklahoma. And, we would swap weekends. He would come and see me, and I'd go see him. It didn't matter if I was at home, if I was at, my husband's house, my folks' house, staying the night, whatever. I would still wake up at 3:33.
It's like a waking dream. I don't know that that's what it is, but I did a paper in college on dreams. I didn't retain a whole lot of the information, but what I do remember is that there is a lot of phenomena associated with dreams. And I think that, I don't know, when you said every night at 3:33, it's almost like there's something happening there that would normally happen in a dream, because I used to have reoccurring dreams as a kid. And
Hmm.
this is, I think a lot of people have experienced that. So in that regard, it's not unheard of. This is just happening on the other side of the dream world. But go on.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, like I said, I don't remember the exact day in January. I just know it was in the month of January.
Hmm.
And I don't know the exact day in November when it stopped, but I do know that it was around the anniversary of my dad's passing. He passed away in 2007. And this is where the weird coincidences are going to start gradually, and as I go on, you're going to start seeing these synchronistic events unfold to the point where you can no longer say it's a coincidence. Like something is definitely going on. But when it stopped, it was, like I said, in November, and which, keep in mind, that is the 11th month. So and the night that it did stop, it was weird because I had a dream that my father had come to visit me. And in the dream, he is literally stepping out of the closet of my room. And in my dream, I'm like in bed, I'm propped up on my elbow, looking at him, and I say, "What are you doing here?" Because it just freaked me out. I mean, it was so real, and I couldn't believe it. And that, and I mean, I guess I should have been like just extremely excited, and I was, but at the same time, I was in shock, because I'm seeing him standing there, and I'm just like, "What are you doing here?" And before he could answer, I woke up. But when I woke up, I was propped up on my elbow, just like I was in my dream, staring at the closet. And as I'm like looking around, I'm like, okay, what just happened here? Then I realize, okay, well, my room's lit up. It's bright. And I look over at the clock, it was 7:15 in the morning. So I had actually slept through the entire night.
Yeah.
It didn't wake up at 3:33. But it's just that odd connection of having this dream of seeing my dad, which will kind of start to play into this as well. So that was in 2009. And, for that whole 11 months, waking up every single night, 3:33, now I realize that I think it was happening because it was being so persistent because it did not want me to forget that number.
Hmm.
It was like it was doing everything that it could possibly do to drive itself into my head and never forget it. So we have to fast forward several years. So we fast forward to 2015. Well, in 2014, my husband and I got married in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And my intention was to take his last name. But no one told me that if I had just simply signed our marriage certificate as Garrick King instead of Garrick Staggs, because that's my name I was born with, but if I had done that, it would have legally changed my name. But I didn't know that. So, we got married and everything. And so I had to go through the whole court process of legally changing my name. And we decided to wait because, it was quite a bit of money to go to, Santa Fe, the trip and everything. And then we knew we had Christmas coming up, and with his family and my family, we had a lot of gifts to buy for, and so we were just like, okay, let's just put it off till, next year, and then I'll start the process. So I started it pretty early in the year, but because of how the court system works, it wasn't until August 3rd that I officially became Garrick King. And that was in 2015. So literally within 2 or 3 days of this happening, there was a night that my husband went to bed early. I stayed up doing some writing because at this particular time I was heavy into I'm going to be an author. I'm going to write books, you know. So I was doing writing and about 10:30, 10:40 maybe, I decided it was getting late. It was time to go to bed. So put my computer away, go upstairs, grab my Kindle because I always just enjoyed reading a little bit before I fell asleep. And so I read, for, I don't know, good 15, 20 minutes or so, until my eyelids started getting heavy. And then I decided, okay, it's time to put this Kindle away and just go to sleep. So set the Kindle down, and I always put it face down because, you know, notifications that pop up in the middle of the night, I didn't want that light constantly waking me up. So, I mean, it's bizarre, but it's just like I just closed my eyes, and within a matter of seconds, it was as though someone had wheeled in this ginormous spotlight and put it next to the bed and turned it on. Because I am suddenly just seeing this brilliant white light just shining right through my eyelids. And the weird thing is, most people would, it would startle them enough that they would wake up, or not wake up, but just open their eyes and go, okay, what is that? I didn't do that. I laid there trying to rationalize where this light was coming from. And so all these different thoughts was, you know, going through my head. I thought, okay, did someone pull into the parking lot downstairs, and their headlights are shining through the window? But our bedroom was on the second floor. And so I've said this a million times, but unless that car was flying, there's no way its lights could be shining through our bedroom window. And so then I started thinking, okay, like, holy crap, did someone break in, you know, and they're shining a flashlight in my face? But then I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, we have three dogs in bed with us. I didn't hear a noise. They're not disturbed. You know, they didn't hear anything. So that's unlikely. And so after going through this whole process of trying to rationalize where this light was coming from, that's when I decided to open my eyes and just look. And imagine if you can, I mean, you're just, I can't even begin to describe this light. I mean, it was just white. That's all I'm seeing is white. And it was brilliant white. Didn't hurt my eyes, nothing. But I'm seeing that. And then I open my eyes and it's pitch black. The room is just dark. There's nothing. I set up, I looked around. I'm like, what just happened? What just happened? You know, I was wide awake. You know, I don't think I fell asleep. But there wasn't even enough time to fall asleep. So, you know, I look over, the dogs are there, my husband's there, the room's dark. And I just happened to glance over at the clock and it was 11:11. So I thought, okay, you know, again, didn't think anything about it. It was meant nothing to me. So the next day I'm at work, I'm talking to a coworker, I'm explaining this whole experience with this white light. And she said to me, she goes, "It sounds to me like someone was trying to come and visit you." And, you know, I thought about it and I was like, okay, that kind of makes sense. But I made a joke, you know, I was like, well, if they were, they need to come during normal business hours, you know, not at night when I'm trying to fall asleep. And so we talked for a few more minutes and then I go back over to my cubicle. I start working, start my day. Few hours pass. My stomach starts to grumble. I'm thinking, okay, it's getting close to lunchtime. You know, it's time to eat. And I look up at the time in the upper right-hand corner of my Mac at work, and it was 11:11. And I did, for a brief second, have this thought, this crap better not be starting again with these numbers. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong because from that moment, I started seeing 11:11 all over the place. And, you know, a lot of it was just happening, you know, just glancing at the clock and it would be 11:11. Now, I understand that, you know, we can condition ourselves to do something without even thinking about it. You know, we could condition ourselves to just happen to look at the clock at the exact same time every day. But you cannot condition yourself to see a number on a truck driving down the highway and it has this big long string of numbers, and then right smack in the middle of it is 1 1 1 1.
Wow.
You can't train
Yeah.
yourself to go into a grocery store and make a one-time purchase and your receipt be $11.11. Now, unless you were going in every single day and buying the exact same thing, you
Mhm.
know, then yeah, I could see that. But just these random one-offs. Um, it wasn't like 333. It wasn't an exact time every single day. And it wasn't necessarily every single day, but it was enough that it was like the 333 experience. I knew that after a certain period of time that something again was trying to get my attention. Pay
Absolutely.
attention to this number. So, like I said, it was happening so much I could not ignore it. I just simply could not ignore it. And I started looking for connections because I'm like, it has to mean something. I went on the internet and started looking, and of course, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of websites um, talking about the number 1111, that it's an angel number, that it means your guardian angel is trying to communicate with you. I saw some websites where it said that it's the universe. The universe is trying to connect with you. And at first I was like, okay, whatever. That seems kind of hokey. That's just the skeptical side of me. Um, but again, it was happening so much that I
Mhm.
couldn't ignore it. So it's when I started looking for connections. Is there anything in my life that connects me to the number 11 or 1111? Well, I didn't have to go far because as soon as I started looking at numbers, and I mean, I looked at numbers everywhere. I looked at our address, everything. But the deeper connections are my birthday. I was born September 2nd, and 9 and 2 is 11. September 2nd is the 245th day of the year, and 2 plus 4 plus 5 is 11. The stronger ones are after I changed my name from Garrick Staggs to Garrick King, my name became exactly 11 letters. My first name ends in K, and my last name begins with K, and K is the 11th letter of the
Letter.
alphabet. So encoded right in my name is the number 1111. Um, so then I started looking at, okay, our address, like I said. So I added up all the numbers in our address and the total. Let me look at my sheet here because I want to make sure I get this right.
While
Uh,
you were talking, I looked it up. I just Googled it just to see what would happen. And it says the number 1111, this is the top result on Google, says the number 1111 is considered a powerful and creative angel number that can have many meanings, including spiritual awakening, guardian angel, and divine guidance.
yep. And you're going to see all that play out, all of that play out. So our first address that we were living at when this first started was, and I don't live there now, so I'm going to give out the address, but it was 3260 South Lakewood Avenue, apartment 7A, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74135. And so I took all the numbers, zip code, everything, added them up, and the total is 38. And 3 and 8's 11.
3 and 8, yeah.
Not only that, but the first four digits of the address, 3260. So 3 and 2 is 5, 5 and 6 is 11. So I was like, okay, that's odd. So then we end up moving. And this next address, it'll sound interesting from the very get go, but it was 8111 South 77th East Avenue, apartment 202, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 74133. So I added up all of those numbers. The total is 47. 4 and 7 is 11. And just like the previous address, the first four digits, 8111 is 11.
What is going on?
Yeah. And then we look at my dad. So my dad was born April 7th. So 4 and 7 again is 11. He died in November, the 11th month. His father also died in the month of November, but before I ever got a chance to meet him, he died when my dad was 16 years old. But he also died, in November, the 11th month. So it was like all these 11 connections just coming out of nowhere. And then the weird sort of synchronistic type things started happening with I got an email one time from Old Navy, and I had not shopped at Old Navy in years. So I don't even know how they had my email address. Um, but what caught my eye when I was looking at my email was the subject of the email was it's 11:11. And I was like, okay, what's this about? So I open it up. Nowhere in the email does it talk about 11:11. It was not November, nor was it November 11th. There was no reason for them to even state it's 11:11. So I took a screenshot of that email and had sent it to a coworker. And this particular coworker at this time, um, I was gradually telling her about this, and she was kind of like, "Oh yeah, that's interesting," but you could just tell she was like, "Okay, nutcase." Um, so I took a screenshot and I sent it to her. I was like, "Check this out." And so she got it and she's like, "Whoa, that's weird." And then as I'm like waiting for her to respond, I'm like looking at my phone and it is literally telling me that the screenshot that I sent her was the 11 of 11 attachments. So, screenshots, whatever, that I had sent her over a period of time. And then I realized I sent the text to her at 11:11 p.m. that night. Like not even paying any attention.
You're
And so
right.
then I
It has crossed the threshold of coincidence at this point.
oh yes. Oh yes. And so I was like, oh my God, look at this. I was like, I took another screenshot, and showed her that, it's 11 of 11 attachments, and then said, look at the time I sent it to you. And then she was like, okay, that's weird. You need to see an exorcist. And I'm like, okay, I don't think it's evil. I don't feel anything negative about it. It's just a weird thing going on. And I mean, this went on for years, just seeing the number everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. In 2021, this is like right when, COVID was going on, and I work from home and have for the past, I don't know, 8, 9 years. Um, but I was just sitting here working, and on this one particular day, I started having both experiences. 333 was starting to show itself, and 11:11 was starting to show itself all in the same day, just in various different ways. Um, excuse me. One of them was a file that I was working on, an Excel spreadsheet file that I was working on, and I grabbed it and put it into an email to send it to someone, and it showed me the size of the attachment, and it was 11.11 kilobytes. I was like, okay, this
Incredible.
is ridiculous. So I had this thought like, okay, what's going on? Like, why are these numbers suddenly showing up all in one day? And out of nowhere, just a random thought popped into my head. And I do make it very clear that it was a thought. I did not hear a voice. I'm not hearing voices in my head. It was just a thought. And the thought, now, when I say that, though, let me just kind of back up and say that now looking back, I feel that it was a guided thought. But the thought was to multiply those two numbers together, 11:11 times 333. So I did. And the result is 369,963. Now,
Tesla.
yes, yes, that's one of the main reasons that it stood out to me because two main reasons. One, because of Nikola Tesla. He's quoted as saying that if you only understood the magnificence of the 3, 6, and 9, you would hold a key to the universe. But also, the number's a palindrome. It reads the same forwards and backwards. So I thought, okay, interesting. But what does it mean? It's just, it's now there's suddenly a third number in the mix, So really, it wasn't like too long after that that another random thought pops into my head. And that thought was add 1111 to that number. So I was like, okay, so I do. And the result was 371074, which did not stand out to me at all. I mean, nothing about it seemed interesting at that time. It will here in a moment. But now I'm like, okay, started out with two numbers, then a third, and now I'm at a fourth number, and I have no idea what this even means. And I was like, it has to mean something. So at least 2, maybe even 3 days go by that no other thoughts come to me. I'm just stuck looking at this damn number. So, like I said, 2 or 3 days pass, and then out of nowhere, another thought pops into my head. And this is what's weird about this next thought. This is where I say it's guided, because it's kind of an impressive instruction. The thought was to add 369963 to that number, the 371074, and to every new number that you get. That was the thought. And I was like, okay. So I start doing that. So the first number, 371074. The second number is 741037. And then the third number is 111000. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting, because here now I have this third number that starts with 1111. But what's the two numbers preceding it? And what's with all the numbers after? And I went kind of apeshit over this, because I took the number calculations all the way up into the 100 billions. Okay. And when I first started doing these calculations, I was doing it by hand, just in a spreadsheet. And I was just doing the math, with a calculator, and just, typing out the numbers and everything. And that's before I realized that the spreadsheet can do the math for me if I just put the formula in. So once I realized that, well, then that's when I took it all the way up into the 100 billions, because I didn't have to sit there and calculate every single one. So, I generate all these numbers, and they don't mean anything to me, except for that one that started with 1111. So I start examining the numbers. I'm like looking at them hard, and there has to be something. There has to be a meaning behind this. So I start doing the normal things, like reducing the numbers down. To reduce the number down, you would take like a number like, 3260, and you would add up each individual number until you got the total. So I did that, and they either all came back to like 22, I think a couple came back to 31, or they just came back to 4. But the ultimate thing here is even 22 reduces to 4. 31 reduces to 4. And then like the one started with 1111, well, you add those up and you have 4. And I started realizing that all these numbers are coming back to the number 4. And it took a while. But I finally realized that 4 was the key. It was the key to unlocking every single one of those numbers and turning them back into 1111. So to kind of explain that, so as I mentioned, the first number that was generated was 371074. So when you take the last 4 digits, 1074, and you add the remaining numbers, 37, you get 1111. In the same way with the second number, it starts with 74. And so the last four are 1037. Take 1037, add 74, you have 1111. The third number, it starts with 1111, but if you take the last four, so 1 and 3 zeros, so you have 1,000, and add 111 to it, you're obviously going to get 1111. So I started looking, I went down this list, and every single number, all the way up into the 100 billions, comes back to 1111. And so I'm sitting here thinking, like, what are the chances of this?
Yeah.
What are the chances that I would wake up at a certain time every night for practically 11 months, and then several years later start seeing the number 1111, then have a day where both numbers are showing up, and I start having these random thoughts instructing me on what to do, and coming out with this pattern where every single number comes back to 1111. So I start digging in even more, looking at these numbers, thinking, okay, well, they come back to 1111. But again, what does that mean? What's the purpose? And I started recognizing other patterns taking place in the numbers. So this might be a good point to share my screen.
Okay.
Share. Let's click here. And let me know if you can see everything.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I could see it.
So let me pull up this right over here.
I wonder if, just a side note here, I wonder if 1111 reduced down to four for you a lot because there's four ones in that number.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Really?
Well, also my birthday, 9/2 and then 1973, you add up all those numbers, and I believe it's 31 is the total, and that reduces to four. And I even explain this in my book that when you see that four, this has taught me to look outside of the box, see the bigger picture, look at numbers differently. For most people, four, they wouldn't make that connection, because how can you get to the number four? Well, you can take two plus two and get four. You can take two times two and get four. You can take three plus one and get four. But most people don't think of taking one plus one plus one plus one. So it's sort of this encoded thing taking place. But after I got these numbers generated and I'm looking at them, some odd things started popping out. And one of them was the last digit of every single number is following a sequence. It starts with 4-7, and then we hit 0. And I can zoom in on this so you can see it better. So what was interesting is it's 4 and 7, which is 11, but I was 47 years old when this started. And then we hit the number 0. And then the sequence starts from there. And that sequence goes 3, 6, 9, which should sound familiar already.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2, 5, 8, 1, 4, 7, and then we hit 0 again. And then it repeats 3, 6, 9, 2, 5, 8, 1, 4, 7, 0. This repeats all the way up into the 100 billion mark. Let's come over here.
And it probably just goes further from there, right?
Yeah, I mean, I just stopped at 100 billion because
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, this is far enough. I mean, how far literally do I have to take this? But if
This
you
is
look,
it's a pattern. It's
yeah,
a language pattern or something.
yep, it is a repeating sequence.
Yeah.
So if we look here, we have 0. Well, we can actually come up here. So we have 4, 7, 0, and then 3, 6, 9, 2, 5, 8, 1, 4, 7, 0. And then it repeats 3, 6, 9, 2, 5. And then, of course, that's where I stopped. But it's repeating. That last number is repeating that sequence over and over and over. Now, the other thing that I started realizing is that with that number 4 sort of instructing me to look at the last 4 digits and then observe the remaining numbers, that's when I realized that the last four digits of every number are going down by the number 37.
Last
Okay.
four. Okay. Last four digits are going. Okay, I got you.
So 1074,
Yeah.
next is 1037. That's the
Yep.
difference of 37.
Yep.
But the remaining numbers are going up by the number 37. So you can see 37,
Oh,
74,
goodness.
111, 148, 185, 222, and so on. And that sequence plays out all the way up into the 100 billion mark. So I'm like, okay, this is interesting. 37. Then we have these numbers that all come back to 1111, and then this end sequence. Um, and this is when I basically started noticing not the, like patterns, but I started getting visual, um, almost like pictographs, if you will, in my head. And it kind of started with the first two numbers, 371074 and 741037. When you look at these two numbers, they're doing something unique. The 37 has jumped to the end of the second number, and the 74 at the first number has jumped to the beginning of the second number.
Yeah.
So the only thing that's remaining the same is the 10 in the
Mm-hmm.
middle.
If you're listening and you can look at this right now, he's got this up on the screen. It might be worth glancing at your phone. But basically, what we have here is we have a, a sequence of six numbers that the first two and the last two of which are inverted. You can describe this probably better than I can, but I see what's happening here.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is where the connections are going to even like start getting even more relevant, more like heavy when you start seeing this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so one of the other things I started doing too during this whole period and looking at these numbers was I started exploring gematria. And I didn't really know, I mean, I knew a little bit. I'd heard the word, like in podcasts and stuff like that, but I didn't really understand a whole lot about it until I started digging into it. And so one of the first things that I did was is I went and started looking to see what words or phrases have the value of the number 333. So these are just some, not all, but a few that really stood out to me. So these phrases that I'm about to read to you have the value of 333. The tool, magic secret, speaking in code, hidden intelligence, a code to find God, angelic host, looped time, earth ends, message of end, beast sigil, and the word uncloaked. So when I started seeing these, I'm like, okay, this is odd because, like the tool. Well, that's kind of what this is. I mean, that's what gematria is. It's a tool. It's a number tool for finding connections. And then like magic secret, it's like, okay, it does feel like that there's some kind of magic secret being revealed here. And then speaking in code, that one really stood out because that's what felt like was happening. So, something is speaking in a code to me. And then a code to find God. That's where things started getting really interesting. Looped time, this will come up here in just a minute. And then earth ends and message of end, that will also come up here in a minute. And then simply uncloaked, it's just like the cloak has been removed and
Mm-hmm.
now this information is being revealed.
So while you were talking, I just for fun, I put 333 into gematria just to see what we could get back live in the middle of the episode.
Yeah.
And funny enough, a lot of these similar phrases came back. Magic secret, I got. But I also got Gemini Messiah, and I also got Thule or Thule. The Thule Society is a Nazi society that I did my last podcast on.
Oh, wow.
So I just thought that was weird.
Yeah.
And then there's one that says I can't sleep. That kind
Yeah.
of
I can sympathize with that one.
yes, yes. And I'm not going to go too far into this. I just thought it'd be interesting to see what would happen if I put this in like live in the middle of the show. And it says I am the death code,
Hmm.
and then a lot of the other phrases that you have up there. Just saying, interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, here's what I've discovered about gematria, and a lot of people will dismiss it because they'll say simply that you're just looking for connections. And which, yeah, that's what research is. You are looking
Hmm.
for connections.
Hmm.
Um, but people don't stop and think about why the connections exist in the first place. And when it
Hmm.
comes to gematria, you can have a word that I'm just trying to think off the cuff here. Um, like let's say the word chocolate. I don't know what the value of that is in gematria, but let's just say that the value is, I don't know, 147 or something like that. And then you could have the word meteorite. And let's just say that it too has the value of 147. Well, chocolate and meteorite don't seem to go together. So the way that I describe this as working is like it's like a puzzle. Let's say that you have a two puzzles in a box, and both puzzles have 1,000 pieces. Okay.
Hmm.
And you take both puzzles and dump them out onto a table. So what are you going to do? You're going to start looking for the connections. You're going to look for the pieces that fit, the pieces that connect together. Now, the connection here is that they're both puzzles and they both have 1,000 pieces, but they're each going to form a different picture when they're complete. So that's how I view gematria. You're going to find phrases that have the same value, but they may not appear to connect. So you're looking for the ones that connect, that seem to make sense with one another.
Yeah, you're going to, and for me, in my experience, I've used gematria as well. I've used it. I was looking for a an old treasure that's rumored to be in Appalachia. I was trying to figure out a cipher for that treasure, so I was using gematria, and I got to where I felt like I was getting messages back. I was getting messages from something that was trolling me as well.
Hmm.
I feel like you can get messages from the other side doing this sometimes.
Yeah,
Very
yeah,
much so.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because people all the time, I mean, since I have started talking about my experience, I have gotten thousands. I mean, there was one point where I had over 40,000 emails from people all over the world just emailing me their story. Like, I'm seeing this number, I'm
Wow.
seeing this number, you know, and they were all coming to me wanting me to tell them what it meant. And I'm like, I have no idea what it means,
Hmm.
you know. Um,
But
but
we all
numbers,
have to be connected to this in some way. Like if it goes back to what Tesla was saying, if the universe is held together by this numerical glue of 369, and we're here actively, we're a part of, we're living, breathing, we're a part of this universe. We have to be integrated with these numbers to some degree.
mhm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, you're gonna see um how numbers speak to us. And that's exactly what's happening here. And it happens every single day. We we need to be trained, I guess, in a sense, to start looking and recognizing numbers, looking at numbers and recognizing the numbers and finding the patterns because they exist. They are there. And, you know, I think it'll help guide people towards certain things. Um, And like you said, communications from the other side coming through. This could be another way of them communicating with us.
Yeah.
I mean,
I didn't realize that until I started working on, and I know it sounds silly that I was looking for this treasure. It was before I had a podcast, and I'm not going to go into this, but there is a Swift silver out there that's still, it's thought to be out there. And there's numbers and there's a cipher and the bill cipher and all that. So I was going through the bill cipher and I was plugging the actual cipher itself into gematria to see what would come back. And it got a little weird there for a little bit. It felt like there were some entities giving me personal messages in there with phrases. Actually, there were phrases coming back that applied to what I was looking for, and kind of thrown in there with these other phrases where it was some sort of a nasty trolling spirit.
yeah,
It
yeah,
felt like,
yeah.
just
No,
saying.
I believe it. I believe it. I believe it. One of the interesting things when all this first started as well, like I mentioned earlier, it was kind of like right at the height of COVID. So everyone was stuck in their homes. And one of the things I started doing was I started watching Huff Paranormal on YouTube. And I mean, I just think anything paranormal, spirit related, ghost related, whatever, I find it fascinating because I've had so many of those experiences in my life. Um, but I thought his ghost box sessions were kind of cool. And I thought to myself, well, I can do that, you know? So I went and bought a ghost box, even downloaded some of those apps. And I did several sessions where I believe 1,000% that I was communicating with my dad. Um, I asked very controlled questions that only he would know the answer to. Um, and he responded accurately every single time. He said some very bizarre things, um, such as, I asked him, "Can you tell me where you are? Like, are you in a building somewhere? Are you like outside?" I was just trying to think of like where could you possibly be, and his response was, "We are by the sea." And I was like, "Okay, that's odd." And then I even asked him, "What do you do there?" And he said, "We build." And I was like, "Okay, you build, but what do you build?" And I kid you not, he said, "Spaceship Hull." And in the recording, you can literally hear me go, Dad, did you just say spaceship? Because I was like, what? And he goes, possibly. Like he was just like messing with me. And so then I asked him, can you tell me why I keep seeing the number 1111? And he responds, he goes, what is it? And now looking back, I'm thinking that he was doing that to buy time. Um,
Hmm.
and I said, is it important? And he said, might. That's all, might. Like it might be. But then, before anything else could be said, two other voices come in, and one says, you can't answer that. And the other one says, you can't tell him.
Oh yeah.
And then he says, I can't say. And from that moment forward, I have been unable to connect with him at all.
Like he had some handlers there that were coaxing
Exactly.
him or something, or at least censoring him.
Yep. Yep. And what's interesting about that is when I asked him, what do you do there? And he said, we build. And I said, yeah, you build, but what do you build? When I was doing these sessions, I was using an H6 Zoom recorder. And I did that so that I could plug in either the Ghost Box or the apps and record to one track and record my voice to another track. The reason being is that, using these apps, sometimes they'll just start talking right in the middle of when you're trying to say something. So I didn't want my voice to obscure theirs and vice versa. So I thought if I have them on two separate tracks, if they say something while I'm talking, I can mute my track and just listen to theirs. And that's a good thing that I did that, because when I, excuse me, when I asked him the question, yes, you build, but what do you build? There was a voice that came in, and I couldn't make out what it said until I isolated it. And it was straight up out of the X Files. It said, "We are not alone." And at
Yeah.
first I took it as, they're saying, okay, we're not alone in the universe.
Yeah.
But now thinking back, was he telling me we're not alone? Like there's other people listening,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Right. Right. Like those. Right. Right.
Yeah,
It's crazy. I'm just going to sprinkle this in.
sure.
I covered a case called the 4chan whistleblower. And it's a guy who said that he was tasked by a company that he wouldn't name with monitoring a big spaceship out in the ocean. And what they did was they built UFOs. And he's a part of this. He was kind of like a branch of the military industrial complex, basically. And they work with military. But he put out 40 pages of Q&A on 4chan. He went live. He's like, "Hey, here's the deal. I'm whistleblowing. I'll be here for the next couple of days. Ask me whatever you want." And there's 40 pages of him answering people's questions online about what they did there, and just things uh surrounding this facility, this UFO building facility out in the ocean. And it just came to mind when you said you got a message back that they were by the sea and that they were building a spaceship hull. That's what came to mind.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I can see the connection there. And, it was odd because basically, excuse me, um, when I was doing these recordings, I mean, I was doing them for myself, and I
Mm-hmm.
was never intending to put them on YouTube or put them out there. I was just, if I made a connection, then I recorded everything so that I could also play it for my mom and my brother. Which before I asked the dreaded question of, do you know why I keep seeing 1111? Um, I was asking him other things, and like my parents had gotten divorced later in my life, but not when I was a kid. And he had a message for my mom, which was that he still loved her, and so I wanted to be able to send that to her so she could hear it, which it broke her heart when she heard it,
Yeah.
but it was a good thing too at the same time to know that we continue, we go on after we die. But I was talking to my brother about it, and he said that the whole "we are by the sea," he goes, that makes me think of the waters above and the waters below. And like, I said, I understand that, but at the same time, it makes me also think of a sea of stars, space.
Yes.
Um, and I went through multiple different thoughts and ideas, about spaceship whole. Like, what's he referring to? Is he referring to an actual spaceship? Um, are they harvesting souls and rebuilding bodies? Because even our body of itself is a vehicle.
Sure, sure.
So all these different thoughts and ideas was going through my head. But yeah, I mean, it was a weird thing for him to say. But man, when I asked that question about 1111, I mean, that just seemed to
Yeah.
seal the deal, and the conversation was over. So when that happened, it also triggered this idea that, okay, there is something more to this. Um, and why can't he tell me? And my thought was that maybe it's because I'm meant to go through this process without, his, like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, I kind of feel like he was guiding me, but he couldn't just come right out and tell me the answer. I had to go through all of this and discover it myself because it would have more of an impact, more of a meaning if
Yeah.
I did, rather than him just coming straight forward and saying, "This is what it means." I don't know.
Yeah.
I can't seem to communicate with him, so I don't know. Um, but anyway, so let's jump forward. Let's look at 1111 because that's the next number I looked up and wanted to see what phrases had the value of 1111. And these are even more interesting. So we get the quantum number, the architect of the matrix, great ability to cipher code, hidden knowledge, most possessed number, just a dream, be aware of God, twin flame, who is Bob? And that one sounds ridiculous, but it will come back here in just a moment. The interconnectedness of gematria, Jesus' blood, and then this one here that I haven't read is the important one. The beginning is the end, and the end is the beginning. Now, why is that one important? Because go back and look at the first two numbers, 371074 and 741037. It is literally showing us that the beginning is the end, and the end is the beginning.
Yep, I see
Literally
it.
played out right in the numbers. And then we get gematria is anagram equals great I am. And not only is that an interesting statement, but it's a true statement because if you rearrange the letters in gematria, you can form the sentence great I am.
Huh.
And then represent the chosen mathematician. Let us create man in our image, only the truth, in open singularity. Now, you're going to start seeing these phrases as we go through this start playing out. So from there, I will come back to this one in just a second. So the next thing I did was I wanted to look up gematria values or phrases for 369963. Well, the number was too big. So either no one's found any, or I mean, surely they have to exist somewhere, but it's probably going to be like a huge paragraph that's going to have that value. But I decided to split the number in half because it is a palindrome and it's, you know, it's the same forwards and backwards. So 369 and then 963. So if we look up the values or phrases that have the value of 369, we get humans, the math of God, the base code of life, earth, end, near. So we're getting another reference back to the end of the earth. Children of light, desolation, the end of the Bible, and change the paradigm.
It's funny because desolation is actually a word used in the book of Revelation pertaining to the end of the world as well.
Yep. Yep. And you'll see that ultimately that's what this is leading to. Um, we'll get into that in just shortly.
Okay.
So then 963, the event, end of days prophet. Only the chosen can see, created by prophet, the truth codex, Almighty God's code reader. And this is what's interesting. Let us make man in our image, whereas 1111 was let us make man in our image, I think it was.
Mhm.
Or no, what was it? Let us create man in our image. So we're getting these connections. And then the blazing star is the last one. So again, finding these connections, I start finding other phrases that also have the value of 1111. And this is where it gets very, very bizarre. But these phrases actually have the value of 1111 and contain my name within them. So the first one, Garrick King is here. He has a purpose. That
Well,
phrase
that
has
came
the value
back.
as 1111. Yep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And all of this is verifiable. You can go to gematrix.org, type any of these phrases in, and you'll see that they have the value of 1111.
Okay.
The next one, Garrick King decodes the God matrix. The next one. In God, Garrick King is the chosen mathematician. Now, my favorite one, Garrick King, aliens made you,
Wow.
has the value of 1111. Now, this is interesting, but the phrase I'm code repeated 11 times has the value of 1111. What are the chances? And then the phrase I am God has the value of 101. Repeat that phrase 11 times. So take 101 times 11 and you'll have 1111. So, as does a Bible code. And we'll get into Bible codes here in shortly. So, those phrases, when repeated 11 times, have the value of 1111. Now, what's interesting about in God, Garrick King is the chosen mathematician. And then up here, we see represent the chosen mathematician also has the value of 1111. So when I start finding these connections, especially the ones that have my name, I remember distinctly calling my brother up and going, okay, you have to listen to this. I cannot believe this. And I'm like it's like a calling almost. And I'm like, but why me? Why me? I'm no one special. I'm no different than anybody else. Like, why is this information coming to me? And of course, my brother was like, well, why not you? I was like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I don't know. But I mean, again, I don't feel like I'm anything special. So I don't know why this info is coming to me. So shortly, this is where the who is Bob is going to come into play here. So I get an email to my work email address, and the subject line of the email was a note from the universe. The body of the email was the same thing repeated, a note from the universe. And it was sent to me by someone named Bob. And I have no idea who this person is. To this day, I have no idea who sent this email. Now, think about this. So, who is Bob has the value of 1111. I get an email from someone named Bob talking about a note from the universe. And when I first started researching 1111, those websites were telling me that it's possibly the universe trying to connect with you.
Yeah.
So I'm like, what is going on? And so again, I call up my coworker and I like, you have to see this. You have to see this. And so she says, well, reply. Like, send a reply. And I'm like, but I don't want to because I'm afraid that. And my whole thing was that maybe this was some kind of uh, virus, some kind of phishing
Yeah.
email, and that it just happened to have that subject line just to get someone's attention to try to open it. Which I did open it, but I didn't click on anything and I didn't reply. And I told her, I was like, I'm afraid that if I reply, it's going to trigger something and it's going to take down our entire network, here at work. And she's like, it's not going to do that. Just do it. And I was like, no, I don't want to take the chance. So a couple of months go by. So this email came to me in June 25th of 2021 at 10:26 a.m. So in October, she and I were talking again about other parts of this research that I had found. And she says, did you ever reply to that email? And I said, no. And she's like, why not? And I was like, I don't want, anything to happen. I don't want to be, get in trouble for opening a virus or, sending a virus through the entire network, And she's like, just do it. And then she starts chanting at me. She's like, do it, do it, do it. And I was like, okay, lady, calm down. I will do it. So she literally watched me type out this email. And all I said was, what is the message? And to this day, I have never gotten a reply ever. But as I,
Bizarre.
yeah, it was bizarre. But as I started looking at the numbers, because that's what this whole thing has taught me to do now, is just start looking at numbers. So I start examining the date, like the month, the day, the year, and the time that the email was sent to me. So June 25th, 2021 at 10:26. You add up all of those numbers and it results in 27, which reduces to 9. 2 and 7 is 9. So when you start thinking about this, I didn't reply until October. And I replied, strangely enough, on October 25th. So the email came to me on the 25th. I replied on
Yeah.
the 25th, but several months later. I look at the numbers in the date, add those up, and those also equaled 27, which reduces to 9. And I'm like, okay, what are the chances? What are the chances that I would get an email at this certain time and then I would reply like months later and the numbers come out the same? So then I started looking, I typed in the phrase, a note from the universe in Gematria, and that phrase has the value of 1604, which when you add those up, 1 plus 6 is 7, and 7 plus 4 is 11. So there was
Yeah.
11 connection there. And I was like, okay, here we go.
Hmm.
And then another thing that this has taught me, which we'll see here in just a little bit, is to take numbers and add their mirror reflection to it. So, for example, 1604, we would add 4061. That's the mirror reflection of 1604. So, when we do that, we get 5665, which again, you have to think outside the box, but you're looking at an encoded 1111 because 5 and 6 is 11 and
Yeah.
6 and 5 is 11. And not only that, it's a palindrome again. It reads the same forwards and backwards. And then I also started thinking, okay, is there something more to this message? A note from the universe. And I start thinking, okay, well, note is an anagram of the word tone, Tone. Is it talking about a frequency of some sort? Is that frequency possibly 369? I don't know. So, again, another bizarre
Hmm.
connection. Now, the other bizarre thing is, as I mentioned earlier, when I started calculating these numbers in the 1111 matrix code, I said I was doing it by hand. And I made a mistake. So as I was going through calculating, I was typing the numbers in, I fat fingered one of the numbers. And from that moment forward, instead of the numbers coming back to 1111, they came back to 5 ones instead of 4 ones. So I thought, okay, well, that's bizarre. Why would it do that? And let's see if I have it on here.
Side note, it's interesting that in that phrase, a note from the universe, note was capitalized. I'm sure you,
Yes. Yeah.
as if to say, look at this word more. And I think that was cool what you did there. You found that tone is a part of that word.
Yep. I'm trying to find that particular phrase. It's in here somewhere. Um, Man, where was it? But there is, well, here, maybe it'll come up on gematrix.org if we just go and type it in.
Oh, that's weird. Oh, the 511s. Okay.
Yeah, it was 5
Or
1.
5 1s, excuse me. Yeah.
Here it is. This phrase right here. We are in an artificial matrix. We are slaves. We are being punished. We are being further tested and tried like silver 7 times in the fire the few and refined shall rise.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was interesting. And one of the reasons I thought it was interesting is because the word matrix came up. And as we go through this, you'll see the word matrix come up time and time again.
This is what I'm talking about with getting messages too. That feels like it's a message, deliberate message to from someone to someone.
Yeah. Yeah. Literally. Literally. So when I made that mistake in typing out those numbers, one of the things that I began to see, um, I should have that here somewhere, was that some of the numbers, yeah, here it is, were coming back like the very third number is 111100. It's nothing but ones and zeros. And as I was just scrolling through and looking at the numbers, well, here's another one. This one goes 111, and then we have what is it? One, two, three, four zeros, and then a number or another one,
Mhm.
which looked to me like binary code. And I was like, okay, whoa, is there some kind of binary code message in here? So I went through, pulled out all the numbers that were nothing but ones and zeros. And I found some website. It was a binary code to text translator. And I just took the numbers exactly as they were and threw them in, and nothing came back. And I was about to give up when I noticed on the page they had examples of binary code numbers, and theirs were 8 digits long. And so I started thinking, okay, do I need to reformat my numbers to match that same sequence? And every single one of theirs started with a zero. So, like with this first one, 111100, what I did was is I added a zero in front of it, counted over eight. If I had enough there, then I moved on to the next number. If it started with a one, I put a zero in front of it and then
Mhm.
did the same thing. If I had more than 8 digits, I separated those. If it started with a zero, I left it. If it started with a one, I added a zero in front of it. And I did that until my numbers matched what they had as their example.
Mhm.
When I did that, I got back this man, I thought I had all this in perfect order. It's on here
I I
somewhere. Here
I
it is.
had pulled up 1111 gematria just to see what came up, and one of the things that came up said build upgraded gematria robot.
Awesome.
And it reminds me of what you're saying that you did here.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you're starting to build your own sort of code.
Oh, as we get into this, there's another hidden message that I found literally in the Bible using these 1111 matrix code numbers, and it is literally states that a new AI has been issued to you. Yeah, it gets weird. Um, but anyway, so after I formatted the numbers, the binary code numbers to match what they showed as their example, I hit enter, and this is what I got back. I got XPK backslash colon, and then a capital W, a lowercase h, a capital C, a capital M, a lowercase q, a capital G, and then the at symbol. Okay, that doesn't look like anything, but as I'm staring at it, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, well, this kind of looks like a directory and a file name. You know, like if this was a computer,
Yes.
this would say C for the C drive, and then you would have the backslash and the colon and then the name of the folder. So I copied that, plugged it into search on the internet, and nothing came back. Nothing at all. So I thought, well, what would happen if I just copied the file portion, the part that looked like just the file name? So I pasted that in, and lo and behold, this website comes up, and it looked like a back door into
Oh.
this website because, as you can see right here on screen, it's an HTML There's HTML code in all of this. But
Mhm.
it was a web page for the Security Exchange Commission.
Is it in
And
Zurich?
yes, and so it's the Security Exchange Commission, but it's for a file for the Credit Suisse Bank
Yeah,
in
this,
Switzerland.
I mean, in my research, Zurich and Switzerland are like the hub, that it's the headquarters for the New World Order.
Oh, well, get this. So as I'm examining this website, I get down to where it has the business address and their phone number. And what are the chances
Oh
that their phone
no.
number ends in 333 1111?
Oh my goodness.
Okay. So I kind of got ahead of myself here for just a second, but let me kind of go back and explain something. So, one of the things that I discovered about the number 369963 and why all of these numbers are coming back to 1111 is because that number 369963 acts like a input output processor. You add any four-digit number to 369963 and you follow that same method of taking the last four digits and adding the remaining, it will come back to that same number every single time. Every single time. And to demonstrate that, I'm just going to put this in. So 369963. So give me any four-digit number except for 1111 because we already know that it does that.
5726.
Okay. Plus 5726. Okay. Oh, should have hit equals. So as you can see, the new number is 375689.
Mhm.
Here's another repeating sequence. Every time you do this, every number will start with 37. Every single time. So take 37 and add it to 5689. So we're going to take 5689 plus 37, and we have 5726, the number that you just gave me. And this will happen every single time. Now, think of a number like 1,000. You would think that with those zeros being in there, well, there's no way that this can come back to 1,000. So take 369963
Mhm.
plus 1,000. And as we can see, we get 370963.
63.
Add 37 to 963, and you have 1,000.
What?
Now, that 37 is important. And remember, all of the 1111 matrix code numbers are going up and down by the number 37. The last four digits are going down by 37. The beginning numbers are going up by 37. 37 is an important number. We'll get to it in a minute. But,
So all numbers connect to 3, 6, and 9.
oh, yeah.
And
Oh, yeah.
Tesla was not messing around when he said what he said.
Nope.
He stumbled on something
Yep.
for sure.
Oh, yeah.
This is
Oh, yeah.
crazy.
Oh, yeah. So when I started realizing that, I started thinking, okay, well, all of this started in 2021. So what happens if I take 369963 and I add 2021? Well, we get 371984. Now, this number stood out to me for a couple of reasons because I'm looking at the year 1984 and I'm thinking, okay, George Orwell's 1984. But 1984 is 11 years after I was born. I was born in 73. So I would have been 11 in 1984. So simply add 37
Mhm.
to 1984 and we would have 2021. So the question became, what number do I need to plug in to have it come back and say 2021? So 37 and then 2021. Well, the answer is 2058. And that unfolded the most bizarre sequence. And you're going to see this is where the synchronicities are so far off the chart that you, it just simply cannot be a coincidence. So I go to the internet and I type in, it's hard to research a year that's not even happened yet, but I type in 2058. And what are the chances that a website would come up? Pull it up here. It's the wrong thing I had open. Um, thought I had it already opened up. Give me just a second here. Oh, wait, I guess I already have it opened up. But where did I plug that in? Well, it doesn't matter, but I can't find the link. I was going to, oh, it's right here. So it is a article in The Guardian. This article was written in the year 2000 and it was called Apocalypse 2058. So I start reading through this, and it's talking about this guy named Didier Sornay, who's a geophysicist. And it says that he splits his time between the universities of California, Los Angeles, and Nice. He specializes in analyzing the complex signals that warn of earthquakes or impending crashes in financial markets. I start reading through this, and it talks about how at one point he's researching the Dow Jones index, and he's determined that in the year 2058 something is going to happen because the numbers just go right off the chart. And it says that right here, let's see, Sornay's analysis was based on more than 100 years of the Dow Jones index and 2,000 years of available world population data. Yet both sets of figures forecasted a singularity. Now think about that. Let's go back over to, what was it? 1111. Open singularity has the value of 1111. But it says forecasted a singularity for the same year. That, he says, was scary. Okay. So this guy, Didier Sornay, he's talking about some kind of event taking place in 2058.
Yeah. He says,
So,
according to cosmologists, a singularity kicked our universe into existence. I just want to throw that in there because there's that key word singularity again.
yep. And
Weird phrase for an
universe.
article from The Guardian
Oh,
here.
yeah. Oh, yeah. And this thing was written in the year 2000.
Yeah, it's an old article. Bizarre phrases here.
Exactly. But guess who? Let me pull this back up here.
Written in 2000, right at the kickoff of the new millennia.
I swear I just had this opened up. I was going to show you.
That's such a bizarre article, even down to the title.
Yep. Yeah. Man, where was that? Oh, it's right here. So back to Credit Suisse Bank. Guess who used to be a board member of Credit Suisse Bank?
Oh,
Didier Sornay, the guy that the article is written about. And Credit Suisse Bank is the page that came up with their phone number being 333 and 1111.
yeah.
What are the chances? I mean, literally, what are the chances? And if you look, I actually did the research and pulled up this article from S&P Global Market Intelligence. It says Credit Suisse rebrands systematic investment vehicle reports. And if you look right here, it says CEO Christian Gast and Chairman David Solo have left the company as part of the reshuffle. Board members Didier Sornay and Michael Deegan have also stepped down, according to CityWire. So I have these numbers. Some of them look like binary code. I plug them in. It sends me to a website for the Credit Suisse Bank, whose phone number just happens to end in two numbers that I was seeing, and one of them that I was waking up to for 11 months. And then I come across an article about 20 the Apocalypse 2058 about Didier Sornay, and then come to find out that he was a board member for Credit Suisse Bank. I mean, you can't make these connections
Uh,
up.
yeah, that's wacky.
Way, way, way deep. Way deep. So I go to Google and I typed in how many billion people live on the earth? Because I'm just thinking, like, because he's talking about this population explosion happening and all this stuff. So I go and I type in how many people live on the earth. Well, Google at this particular time sends back a response that says 7.8 billion people. Now, here's what's interesting. It says with the world population at 7.8 billion people as of March 2020 and typical projections of population growth, Earth will be in a state of human overpopulation by 2050 or sooner. Now, 2050 and 2058, it's not that far off. It's a difference of 8 years.
It's the same decade.
Yep. So then I go to gematrix.org and I plug in the number 2058 and I want to see what kind of phrases are generated by this number. And we get many deadly diseases of the apocalypse, a breakaway society, which is mentioned in that article. And then this one, Earth can't sustain 7 billion people. And then the last one, revelations become evident. And so I'm like, what is going on? Like, what is really going on here? So as I mentioned earlier, when I'm seeing these numbers, I talked about pictographs coming to my mind. And one of them was with the number three, or well, it was all of them. It was 333, 1111, and then 369, 963. So when I was like visualizing those numbers in my head, I saw 333 as being a short line, 1111 being a slightly longer line underneath it, and then 369 being like a stair step up. It plateaus, and then 963, it steps back down. And when I created that, I was like, whoa, this looks familiar. And anyone who's seen Ancient Aliens, on Hulu or whatever, the History Channel, will recognize the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the structure, we have a step up, 369. We have this 1111 section and a 333.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that the length of this pyramid is 720 feet. 7 plus 2 is 9. And the width is 740 feet, and 7 plus 4 is 11. And then when you think about it, 9 plus 11 or 9 plus 1 is also 11. I kind of got ahead of myself there for just a second. Let's go back over here. So one of the other things that I was doing when these numbers were first generated is I'm trying to find connections. What do these numbers do? So one of the things I started kind of messing around with was taking the numbers that were generated and then adding them to the next number. And it started forming the sequence here. So taking 371074 and adding it to 741037. So we get this number way over here. It's 111211.
Mm-hmm.
Doing that same process, the next number becomes 222 and then 3111. If we go through all those numbers and we follow that process of taking the last four digits and adding the remaining, we see that these numbers come back to, which I started with 1111 at the top, but we get 2222, 3333, 4444, 5555, and so on. These repeating numbers.
Yeah.
So then I started breaking those numbers down, reducing them. So obviously 1111 reduces to 4, 2222 reduces to 8, 3333 reduces to 12, and so on. When I got to the double digit numbers, I reduced those down even further. And I wound up with a sequence that goes 483726159. I go to the internet, I plug that in, and the first thing that pops up is something known as the Vedic square. The Vedic square is essentially a multiplication table where every double digit number has been reduced to a single digit. And as you can see, that sequence of numbers is running straight across the middle, 483726159. And then if we come down here, it's repeating backwards. Not only that, it's coming down and then going back up.
Yeah. So it's a known sequence, it's a known code here. Is this from the Vedic texts, or
Um,
is it related to that in any way?
that I don't know, but I do know that they use this grid pattern um, to create artwork like in India and stuff like that on
It's
pot.
got to be
Yeah,
then. Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
yeah.
That's an old book.
Oh, yeah. But then, of course, if you look too, we have a floor of nines and a wall of nines over here. So this really was the first symbol that was generated. So when you look at just that portion that I have there in red, it's basically a cross. And it's an old ancient symbol of the sun.
Mhm. That's how you got to the Temple of the Sun.
Exactly. So I get this first image of the cross that is, an ancient symbol for the sun. And then the second one was the pyramid of the sun. And then if you take that sequence of the first two numbers, 371074 and then 741037, and you put it into that pattern that I showed you earlier, if you go to the sides, you can repeat those same numbers. So 371074, and then over here, 371074 going up. You wind up with this symbol. And when you match it up to the Aztec sunstone in Mexico, it matches perfectly. So now we have three distinct symbols that are representing or generating the sun for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So the next symbol that was generated was every time I was talking to someone about this code, and I would say you take the last four digits and you add the remaining. I did this thing with my hand that I just did, where I basically drew a line underneath the last four and then looped over to the remaining numbers. So basic symbol, but essentially it looks like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I drew a line under the last four, looped over to the remaining. And when I looked at this, I was like, man, that looks like a setting sun.
Yeah.
And then the next symbol is generated from the last digits of the 1111 matrix code numbers, the ones that go in that sequence of 369258147. And that's when I realized it's literally following the pattern of a calculator. So
Yeah.
calculator goes 3, 6, 9, and then 2, 5, 8, and then 1, 4, 7. And then zeros down here, and the pattern repeats.
This has got to be connected to some sort of an ancient calculator, because I looked at that Vedic square that you just showed, and I looked it up real quick, and it is connected to something called Vedic mathematics that goes back to India and the old Vedic texts.
Yeah.
And then also, it seems like people over in South America knew about this code as well with
Oh,
the
I think,
Aztecs.
I mean, I may be the one that is, talking heavily about this code and kind of revealing it and bringing it more to light. but I think people have known about this. I think there's even people in the movie industry that are aware of this code.
Mhm.
Um,
It
like,
looks to me like something that the ancients knew about for sure.
oh, for sure, because this ties into the Hebrew Bible um, in the most profound way possible. So, and then of course, the symbol from the Vedic square. And usually when we see this, we see it with a circle around it. So it looks more like this. But it is an old ancient symbol for the sun. So I'm sitting here thinking like why all of these symbols for the sun? Like what's going on? Why the sun? And the three arrows pointing up, that was like pointing up at what? The
You know
sun.
what's interesting? I'm just going to sprinkle this in. That last symbol you just showed, where it's a cross in the circle, that's an old Hopi Indian Native American symbol.
Yep.
And they had the Hopi prophecy that kind of, you know, anyway, you see where I'm going with that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So after I went to the Credit Suisse Bank, that whole Security Exchange Commission website, and I saw their address. I went to Google Earth and plugged in the address because I wanted to see where this building was. And lo and behold, the first image that I clicked on, the first street view image that I clicked on was this one here. Now we have this incredibly interesting looking person, but look at their
Yeah.
bag.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, there's the symbol.
There's the symbol. I understand that this is the Swiss flag, but it's the same symbol. It's the exact same symbol. All along, these have been clues. Like these clues have just been sprinkled in. And then after I realized that I made that mistake in my math, that's when I realized that mistake was meant to happen. Because if I had never made that mistake, I never would have come across that Security Exchange Commission website. I wouldn't have seen those numbers that look like binary code. I wouldn't have come across the article, Apocalypse 2058, and then the connections with Diddy or Sornay. I mean, I would have probably come across the article because of, typing in the number 2058, but I wouldn't have made that connection because I wouldn't have plugged those numbers in. That mistake happened for a reason.
I don't know if you noticed or if this plays into this at all, but there's a 2111 in that
Uh-huh.
picture. Okay, I figured you've
Yep.
you've covered that.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yep. I noticed that straight away.
Yeah, your mistakes are not mistakes. They're new clues.
Exactly. Exactly. They're clues leading me to the next step. Oh, there it is. That's that 1111. We are in an artificial matrix. But going back to the number 9, this is where things are going to start tying in even more. So let's look at this. Power of 9. So again, all this research, it starts leading me to looking up stuff, trying to figure out, like these interesting things about the number 9. And I came across this article talking about, if you were to put all the numbers 1 through 9 into a pyramid type shape with 9 at the top, and then 1, 2, 3 on the side, and then 4, 5, 6 on the bottom and back up, you would have this pyramid shape. And when you start looking, all these numbers come back to 9. So 9 straight across, 8 and 1 is 9, 7 and 2 is 9, and then 6 plus 5 plus 4 plus 3 is 18. Reduce that down even further, and 1 and 8 equals 9.
Mhm.
Now, when you add up all the numbers 1 through 9, you get 45, and 4 and 5 is 9. I believe it's, if you add up all of the numbers except for 3, 6, 9, it's 27. 2 and 7 is 9. And then I think if you add up all of the numbers except for 9, it's 36, and 3 and 6 is 9. So it always comes back to 9. This then led me to something known as vortex math. And vortex math is basically where you take the first number and then, add it to itself. So 1 and 1 becomes 2, and then 2 and 2 becomes 4. 4 becomes 8, 8 becomes 16, and so on. When you get up into the double digit numbers, if you reduce those numbers down, it produces another repeating sequence. And that sequence goes 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. And then it repeats 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5. Well, when you take that sequence and compare it up here, 1, 2, 4, 8, 7, 5, and then repeats, it is literally forming the infinity symbol.
Infinity symbol. Yeah.
And think about this. What is this doing? It is looping.
It's perpetuating.
Go back to 333 and looped
Ah,
time.
yes.
So I'm trying to think of where to go from here. Because this thing, like I have over 60 videos on my YouTube
Oh,
channel. This
wow.
thing is extensive.
Yeah,
Uh,
so I mean, it just continue. It just seems so. It seems like it just leads to more of these number sequences.
yes, but it's leading to number sequences, but it's also sort of instructing us to pay attention to those numbers and
Mhm.
look them up at like in gematria and find these connections. So,
Well, and so for instance, like when like the Vedic square, like the number sequence that you found, that's already an existing number sequence that's made up of that Vedic square. That's obviously a number sequence that has been used for a purpose in mathematics and probably geometry and and building and all kinds of stuff, right? It's
yeah.
probably in nature as found in nature as well.
Oh
So
yeah.
that's what's kind of stuck out to me as phenomenal here is that you've stumbled across these sequences that are building blocks for our
Absolutely.
universe.
Absolutely. And I, it's the way that I came about, discovering. It's not like I discovered something new. I discovered something that already existed, but an alternate way of getting to it.
Yes.
An alternate way. Um, so one of the things I started doing as well was taking the numbers in the 1111 matrix code and trying to determine what these numbers might mean through gematria. Now, these numbers are large, so I had to basically take exactly what the code was telling me to do, the last 4 digits and the remaining. So I took those numbers, I took the first 11 numbers and split them. So, like the first number that was generated is 371074. So I put 37 in one column, 1074 in another column. Then went to the next number, put 74 in one column, 1037 in another column. And then I started looking up the gematria phrases that have these values. Now, when it came to the number 37, I couldn't find anything that really made sense until later when I started making connections to the Bible, the Torah, and realized that 37 is the value of the name Jesus in Hebrew, actually, Hebrew ordinal gematria. So I was like,
Yes.
that's interesting.
It's interesting too that you said the Torah there as well, because a minute ago when we were talking about the year 2058, I plugged that into Google just to see what happened. And I actually saw that article that you showed. I saw the Apocalypse 2058 article. I scrolled down, I found another article about the year 2058, and it said, our children will read the Torah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
See, That's the other interesting thing about this is everything that I'm saying is verifiable. You can go
Yeah.
to the internet and find exactly what I am talking about.
I'm seeing how this has happened for you because I wasn't trying to go back behind you and check. I was just trying to see what would happen. If I was to do this while I'm talking to you, I was just trying to see what would happen. And like, but what I found is that, yeah, you've been on this journey and all your stuff that's happened to you checks out.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all still on the internet.
Yeah. And I encourage people to plug these numbers in, do the research. You will find exactly the same thing that I'm talking about. I encourage it. I
Mhm.
don't ever take that as like, someone trying to verify what I'm saying or to see if I'm telling the truth. I know I'm telling the truth, but I encourage people to look this stuff up, do the research. Um, the thing is, this code has existed forever.
Mhm.
It's existed forever. Anyone could have found it. I don't know why, but I just happened to be the one, I guess, to do so and start releasing it and revealing it to everyone. And it seems to be foretold that that's what I would do in the numbers because 1111, those phrases that have my name talking about how I would decode the God matrix and I was the chosen mathematician and blah, blah, blah. Um, I mean, I struggled with those phrases when I first came across those because I'm like, again, why me? I'm no one special. I don't want to ever act like I am. I don't want anyone to ever think that I'm above somebody else. I'm not. I'm no different than anyone else. Why did I discover this? I still don't know. I still don't know.
Well, there's a key component to this that I'll point out that I've noticed. You, some people, back at the beginning of this conversation, back when it was just 333, you noticed it, you took note of it, and you waited for almost like a new message. By the time you're seeing 1111, you're interacting with it. You're going further than most people would. A lot of people would say, huh, that's weird. I guess I just see this number. Everywhere I go now, ho hum, I'm going back to my life.
Yeah.
You've looked further. Most people don't look further.
Right.
That's got
Yeah.
to have something to do with this. You're the type of person who's going to dig into the system a little bit.
True. And I kind of look at it though as though I didn't really have a choice because it was so persistent in showing itself that I had no other choice but to pay attention and try to figure out what it meant. Because again, why did it keep showing up
Mm-hmm.
consistently over and over? It was driving me nuts, to be honest. It became this obsession of trying to figure out what it meant.
And it also was very personal for you because the number was appearing in places that were personal for you, like with the addresses and with all the other little synchronicities.
Yeah, my birthday, my name,
Yes. Yes,
you know, and,
exactly.
and the weirdest thing is we have to keep in mind that from 2009 to 2015 nothing happened. It was only after I got married and legally changed my name
Yeah.
and then boom, all of this took place. Because if you were to type in Garrick Staggs is the chosen mathematician or Garrick Staggs decodes the God matrix, its value's not
It
1111.
doesn't fit. Okay. Okay.
So that's the other like super deep thing where you can just sit here and go, okay, it's not a coincidence. It's on purpose. For what purpose I don't know yet. Well, I think I may kind of know, but um,
That's what I was going to ask next is where do you see this going?
So, through my research, I believe that there is going to be an event take place in 2058. It's going to be essentially a reset of this simulation. I believe 1,000% that our reality is a simulation. These numbers, time and time again, repeating themselves, coming back with phrases that essentially tell us that this is a simulation. Um, but the event in 2058, it's going to be a solar flare event. And I think it's going to basically devastate everything. It's going to reset the planet. When you look at the Bible and you hear the story of the flood, that is exactly the same thing. That flood was a reset. What was God doing when he caused the flood? He reset everything back because he didn't like how things were going. He didn't like, how people were acting and everything. So he flooded the entire planet and reset everything.
Yeah.
The this next reset is going to be by fire. And I believe it is going to be a solar flare event. Now, one thing I want to point out is let's see here. This will kind of tie into this.
While you're pulling that up, a couple interesting phrases that pulled up for me when I put 2058 into gematria. I got a breakaway society and I am God. I have returned age of Aquarius.
Yep. Yep. Most people don't realize that right now we are in a 19-year cycle of having, and I want to make very clear when I say this, summer solstice solar eclipses. Now, when I say this and I talk about eclipses, people just hear the word eclipse and they jump ahead of themselves and say, "Oh no, you're lying because we had an eclipse this time, and this time." I am specifically talking about summer solstice solar eclipses. Now, we typically should have them about every 80 some odd years. But for whatever reason, since 1982, we have been having them in 19-year cycles. So we had one in 1982, and then we had another one in 2001, which was 19 years later. We had one in 2020. We will have one in 2039, and then we will have one in 2058. Now, here's the kicker. 2058 is what basically kills the 19-year cycle. We will not have another summer solstice solar eclipse for nearly 200 years. And the question is, why? There is actually a code hidden within those dates.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I
Oh,
took those dates and reduced the numbers down, it performs this sequence, which goes 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, which is weird because those numbers are in sequential order. So I go to, again, gematrix.org, and I plug in the number 23456. And this is, again, verifiable. I'll get that word out here in a second. Because if we go up here and type in 23456, hit enter, this is the only result that comes up. The only result. And let me show you something here. So when I saw this, again, this is where I have to say that this was guided because I don't know how else I would have thought to do this. But I start looking at the numbers because that's what it's doing.
okay.
This
Yeah.
phrase is nothing but numbers spelled out.
Yeah.
There's 13, 21, 12, 20, 9, 16, and so on. It's just numbers spelled out. So when I was looking at this, I had to determine that when it said 20 and 1, is it saying two different numbers, like 20 and 1, or is it 21? When I figured that out and put those numbers in comparison to the English alphabet, it literally forms the phrase multiple infinite waves of love.
Yeah.
What are the chances?
That's wild.
And when you take that phrase straight down and then add the numbers together, we get 339, and that's the value for the phrase end of times. Now, let's talk about just very quickly. I know it's getting late, and you let me know when you want to wrap up, because I could talk for days.
Yeah, well, I'll have to have you back too. So you don't feel like you have to cram everything into this episode because I'd love to have you back.
Yeah, there's no way to get through all of this in one sitting. But to kind of tie this into the Torah very quickly,
Hmm.
with that number 37. So let me pull this up here. The Torah, let me switch over. Can you still see my screen even though
Yes.
I switched? Okay. So I use a lot of these Bible code programs, and you can search for certain phrases. In fact, I have found my name in the Torah encoded along with the numbers 333, 1111. I mean, it's literally
Mhm.
encoded in a Bible code that I would reveal all this. But if we look at Genesis 1 or Genesis 1 1, and we look at the gematria value of Genesis 1 1, the value of that entire phrase is 2701. And this is where you're going to see that even the Torah is a mathematical book. There's a book that is there on the surface level, but then there's another book hidden within it. And that's the mathematical portion of this. There's so much encoded in this book, but there's so much encoded in this first verse. So, as I said, the value is 2701. Keep in mind that the 1111 matrix code numbers go up and down by the number 37. So, what is interesting about the number 2701? Well, 2701 is the equivalent of 37 times its mirror opposite, 73.
Mhm.
It's 2701. Now, get this, 2701 plus its mirror opposite of 1072 is 3773.
7-3.
Now, get this, Jesus is never once mentioned in the Torah. Okay. But Jesus Christ, the name Jesus has the value of 37 and Christ has the value of 73. So you are literally looking, when you see 3773, you are looking at the name Jesus Christ.
Oh, it's not mentioned in the Torah, but it's in there by numerically.
Correct. Correct. Now, the very first word of Genesis is this word. It's Bereshit. It means Genesis. It's the beginning. And
Is this the first verse of the Torah here? Is that what we're?
yeah, it's the very first
Yeah.
verse. It's in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Hmm.
So that first word, let me pull up something here.
Yeah, I know that verse is loaded with esoteric meaning for sure.
Oh yeah, in a big way. Oh well, let me show you something actually really quickly. So let me scroll down here. Okay. So remember the sequence that I was talking about? The end numbers of the 1111 matrix code that go 369 258 1470.
Hmm.
Okay. So if we take those numbers and we put them into a pyramid shape, just like I talked about earlier, we have 369 and then 258,
Hmm.
and it comes back. And then what was the others? One, four, seven. What do we have? The Star of David.
Star of David.
It's also known as the Star of Creation. So I'm looking at this and I'm starting to think, okay, well, what happens now if I start connecting these points? So from this point to this point down to this point, and so on. Well, it makes this. When I first looked at this, most people are just kind of seeing this conglomerate of lines, but I instantly saw a three-dimensional shape.
Yeah.
And it's right here. It's a cube sitting in the middle. And then when you start to actually really look more deeply at this, you start to realize, okay, well, we have the front of another cube and the side of another cube, and then we have the bottom of the cube. Well, look at this. Let me move this out of the way here.
Yeah, now we're getting into sacred geometry.
Oh, yes. But when you move this over, you can see that that fits perfectly.
Yes. And it's
And then we
three
start
dimensional.
stacking these up on top of one another. And what do you see here?
The cross, we're back at the Vedic square.
Exactly. Exactly. And as I continue this on, I thought, okay, well, what happens if I extend these lines further out? So I did. And when I did that, I realized, well, this looks very much like a zodiac wheel. And when I started plugging in the zodiac signs, well, they all fit perfectly within that.
Hmm.
And so then we have the cross, which is the sun sitting right in the middle of it. It is
Yeah.
literally showing us it's connecting to the zodiac. And we're seeing the sun move through all of the different zodiac signs.
Incredible.
And when I came across that, when I started realizing this is when I reached out to Micah Dink. I don't know if you are aware of who
Yes.
Micah Dink is.
Yes, I
So he's
am.
an astrotheologist, um, and he teaches astrotheology. He teaches that Jesus in the Bible is they're referencing the sun,
Hmm.
and that's when I began to realize that he is correct, and that's what we're seeing here. That the solar flare event in 2058. I know how weird this is going to sound and how hokey this is going to sound, but if this takes place the way that this code seems to be predicting, this will be like the second coming of Jesus Christ. Because the sun and the sun are one and the same. And what I have come to realize through this code is that I know this may upset a lot of people, but I literally woke up one day with this dialogue running through my head. And it was repeating, and it was like this long dialogue. And what it was talking about was that the name Jesus or the word Jesus was never meant to be a name. That the person in the Bible that they're calling Jesus, their name was actually Joshua, Yeshua.
Hmm.
That's where Joshua comes from. And what he was teaching people is this thing known as Jesus. And essentially what that is the energy source. I've used this reference before, even though I hate doing it, but it's referencing, if we were to compare it to a movie, um, let's compare it to the Force from Star Wars.
Okay.
It is the essence that binds everything in the entire universe, the entire simulation. It's what connects everything. Everything.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Jesus, said in the Bible was that there is nothing that I can do that you can't do yourselves, and even better. Literally instructing us that we are all the same and we all come from the same source. Now, what I was going to show you here very quickly is using the 1111 matrix code numbers. I came up with my own gematria, literally using the numbers of the 1111 matrix code, starting with 37 and simply going up by
Yeah.
37. So there's 22 Hebrew letters in the Hebrew alphabet. So literally they're going 37, 74, 111, 148, 185, and so on. In the Bible, what number does it say is the number of man?
Uh, I don't know. Would that be 666?
Yep,
Yeah.
666. 666 is the number of man.
Mhm.
In the first time ever, does the word man using matrix gematria have the value of 666?
So can you say that again?
So so the word man,
Yes.
and I think in Hebrew gematria, I think the value is like 45, if I'm not
Okay.
mistaken. Only through matrix gematria does that word now have the value that the Bible
Okay.
itself says is attributed to man.
I got you.
Now, I was talking to you about that. Well, actually, let's look at this really quickly. So, when you look at the word for man, it literally does not translate to man. It translates to a person,
Yeah.
and it's made up of the Hebrew letters Aleph, Dalet, and Mem. Now, think about that: Aleph, A, Dalet, D, Mem, M, A, D, M. That's where they get the name Adam.
Adam.
Now,
He was the first man.
who was the first man? But in the Bible, when they're talking about let's create man in our image, they're using Aleph, Dalet, and Mem. But when they say Adam, they're simply adding the letter Hey in front of it. So it becomes Hey, Aleph, Dalet, and Mem. This letter Hey by itself translates to God. But when it's in front of a word, it simply becomes the. So instead of a person, it now becomes the person. So what's interesting is that when it said, let's create man, they're not saying that. They're saying let us create a person in our image. It's like a mold, if you will. And from that mold, well, then a woman was made.
Yeah. It's
But it's
it's
almost as
coding.
it's coding. Yeah. It's almost as though it's I
Like
lost my train
like
of
a
thought.
formula for Yeah, coding.
Yeah. But when you look at the last two letters that make up man, it's Dalet and Mem, and that's the word for blood.
Yeah, which is what a man is comprised of.
Exactly. Now, you remember how in the Bible it says that God made Adam from the soil?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to show you this really quickly.
This is fascinating. I mean, these old Hebrew symbols are incredibly fascinating too. What do you think the chances are that some of these symbols began as numbers? Do you think they have a numerical quality?
Yes, because back in this time period, they did not have a number system as we do now. So that's basically where gematria comes from. They used their letters in place of numbers.
Yeah, bingo.
So check this out. When we take the Hebrew word for the person, and the Bible translates it to Adam, this is what I think is just cool. And it goes to show you how deeply encoded this book is. So the Bible tells us that he was made from the soil. So if we, I thought I could zoom in on this, but I don't know how well you can see that.
I can see it. I
Okay.
can see it.
So here's what we do. So that hey at the very beginning, if we put a space here, you can see it simply translates to the. And so it's
Mhm.
the person. But if we take that letter and move it to the end of the word, we get Adam. Okay.
Yeah, wow.
But see this letter right here?
Yeah.
This letter is called mem, and it has two different forms. When it appears at the end of a word, as it would here before we added hey at the end, it appears closed. When it's in the middle of a word, it needs to be open. Okay. So it would look like, where is it? Right here. So it would take this shape and see how the translation changed from Adam to
Yes.
land. And it also means earth, ground, and soil.
Yes.
So literally by changing the word, Adam was made of the soil.
That is mind blowing.
Is that not insane?
It's insane. It's like there's an organic quality or even a magical quality to this.
Oh, yes, big
And
time.
it goes back to that first verse of Genesis where it was a spoken word that created everything.
Yes, that's what I wanted to get to very quickly. And we can actually wrap this up with this if I can
And
just
you see
find
that
it.
too in J.R. Tolkien's Silmarillion, which is the creation myth behind the Lord of the Rings universe. He based that off of the Finnish Kalevala, which
Yep.
is Scandinavian folklore, Scandinavian creation myth.
Yep.
And what you find in that story is similar, where they kind of sang the earth into existence.
Yep. Yep. Which is the word for God, the Yud He Vav He, okay, is not meant to be pronounced. It's more like a breath.
Yes.
It's more like a breath.
It's
Um,
like a frequency utterance.
yes, yes, yes. So very quickly, and I'll wrap this up with this here, and we can do another episode later. But this just goes to show how deeply, deeply, deeply encoded this is. So what I've done is I've taken Genesis 1:1 and I've laid out the letters in sequence. And I wanted to find out, is there another Because one of the sequences that's taking place in the Bible is known as ELS. It's equal distant letter sequences. And so basically what that means is like the Bible code software. Have you ever heard of the Bible code?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
So
not super familiar with it, but I can see this totally going there.
yep. Yep. So the Bible is rife with these hidden codes. And it's actually stated that every single person that has ever lived, who is currently living now, and who will ever live in the future are named in the Bible. And not just named, but every portion of their life from the beginning to the end is encoded in the Bible.
Like a palm reading or something, a personal path. Your personal path is coded in the Bible. Is that what that means?
Every single thing that you will do in your life is encoded in the Bible.
Yeah,
I
this
know it.
gets deep. How much stuff do you have on Bible code? Because that could be a totally different episode.
Oh, yeah, I have a ton of stuff that I can show
Yeah.
you
Okay.
with the Bible code.
Well, we're on the doorsteps of that for sure.
Yes. Yes. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to see if there were other sequences. So my first thought was I want to look at first letter placement. Okay. Just in the first verse. I just wanted to see what would happen. So when you take Yud Hey Vav Hey and you look at the first, where each letter first appears in Genesis 1 1. So Yud is the fifth letter. And then Hey is the 12th letter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have to jump over to Vav, which is the 22nd letter in the verse. And then Hey after it. So we look at the first letter placement. We look at the number of where each letter's falling. So when you take 5 plus 12 plus 22 plus 25, we get 64. And 64 in Greek gematria is the value for the word truth. Truth.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in Hebrew gematria, the value for the word truth is 441, which is the equivalent of 3 times 7 times 7 times 3. There's that encoded 3773. And then in matrix gematria, the one that I created based on the 1111 matrix code numbers, the word for truth has the value of 1332. Now, here's where these connections are off the chart, because in matrix gematria, the value for Jesus is 1369. Okay.
Okay.
So what happens when we take Jesus, 1369, and add it to truth, 1332? We have 2701, which is the value of the entire first verse of Genesis 1 1, and is the equivalent of 37 times 73.
That's what I was about to ask next. What is how does the 3773 fit into this?
Yeah, because 37 times 73 is 2701. And then 2701 plus its mirror opposite of 1072 is 3773. Now, 2 weeks ago, I woke up with the word tesseract in my head. Tesseract. And I thought, am I having a stroke? Because I had no idea what a tesseract was. So I thought my brain's trying to form a word that it just cannot get out.
Yeah, no, it's real.
Nope, it is real. And so when I got up and got the dogs and everything taken out and finally sit down at the computer, I typed it in and
Yes.
had no idea that this was going to come up. And for people that don't know, a tesseract is also known as a hypercube,
Yeah.
and it is a four-dimensional equivalent to a cube, much like a cube is a three-dimensional equivalent to a square. And while a cube has 6 square faces, a tesseract consists of 8 cells, or in other words, 8 square cubes. And so these animations basically show how the tesseract is, it's almost like this symbol here of the snake consuming itself. It's like it's giving birth to itself and then folding back into itself, just like it's eating itself and then regenerating over and over and over.
People will know the movie Inception. At some point in that movie, McConaughey is in a tesseract and he's trying to communicate with his daughter. It's like he's trapped in one dimension and she's in another dimension, and he's looking through. There's like a scene I think where he pulls a book off the shelf and he's looking through the bookshelf at his daughter. Anyway, I think that scene is based off of real mathematics and this concept of a tesseract.
Yes. And I think the movie you're thinking of is Interstellar.
I'm sorry, you're absolutely right. Interstellar.
Yep.
Nine. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, because as soon as I mentioned this to a friend of mine and I did the research or looked up the word tesseract, it mentioned the movie Interstellar.
Yeah.
And so I was telling him about it. And he's like, that's one of my favorite movies. You have got to watch it.
Yeah.
And so after looking at all of this, I was watching that movie and I mean, I was just hooked.
I can see that movie fitting into this episode as well. And it
Oh,
just
yeah.
now dawned on me that this is a similar um we're treading on similar ground.
Yep. But when you take that tesseract and you unfold it, as it's showing in this animation here, you get this shape. And what does this look like? Actually,
A
let me
cross,
show
a
you
3D cross. Yeah, blow that up if you want.
here. I actually redid this in Cinema 4D.
Oh, cool.
So,
It's a 3D cross for
yes, when you
those
look at it like
listening.
this, it looks exactly like a cross. Now, get this, when you look at it from the top straight down, what does that look like?
That's our Vedic square slash medicine wheel slash Hopi earth symbol.
Exactly.
Oh, also, it's a quartered circle that goes back to some older ancient traditions. And it's also the broken cross of the four revolving seasons.
Yep. And a symbol of the sun.
Yes.
So, and that's just looking at it straight down. But when you start to move this around, then you realize it's that tesseract unfolded. Now, what's interesting is in Hebrew ordinal gematria, the word the cross has the value of 37. Who died on the cross? Jesus. Jesus's value is
37.
37. In matrix gematria, the cross has the value of 1369. And just a moment ago, I said that in matrix gematria, Jesus has the value of 1369. What are the chances that the cross and the person who died on the cross would have the same numerical value? So, with this whole tesseract idea in my head, I've always had this feeling, if you will, that the Torah could be transformed into some sort of geometric shape.
Mm-hmm.
And I have played around with this and played around with it and played around with it. The only thing that I have discovered is that when you take the Torah, oh, I have to do it down here.
Yeah, there's something to the shape of the cross that well, the Israelites made their encampment in the shape of a cross too.
Yeah. Yep.
Something to that shape.
Well, if we take the Torah and we use the number 37, which, as we know, is prevalent throughout the entire Bible and the 1111 matrix code. So I'm going to change the width to 37. That means there's 37 letters going across. There's 8,238 rows going down. When we get to the very end, right here, there's a missing space. There's like a space for one letter, just one letter. And you would think that if this is the portion, now the Torah is the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. These are the first 5 books that God supposedly dictated to Moses. You would think, this being the word of God, that it would be perfect.
Can I just say too that this looks like the Matrix?
Yep.
When people envision that those green streams of numbers, that's exactly what this looks like.
Yeah, just like the background on my computer.
Absolutely. Yes. That's what this is. It's like a
Yeah.
literal Hebrew matrix.
Yep. And this is where you find the Bible codes because you can adjust the width and do searches, and you'll find words not running horizontally, but vertically and diagonally. And when you start finding these words that are in close connection to one another, that's when you know that you have found something of meaning and value. But seeing this, my thought was there's a letter missing.
Okay.
There's a letter missing. So
I see it down there in the bottom left.
yeah, yeah, there's just an empty space here. So I did some research and discovered that other people have been asking the same question. Why did God start the Bible, the Torah, with the letter Bet? B. It's the second letter of the alphabet. Why didn't he start it with Aleph, the first letter? So I thought to myself, well, that's interesting. Like, what does that do to the translation if you add a letter?
Mhm.
And see if I can do this real quick. As you can see right here, I've already added Aleph to this because this
Yeah.
second letter here, Bet, should be right up next to the other word. That's the translation. First, God created the heavens and the earth.
With first being added now.
Yep.
Hmm.
If you remove Aleph
Hmm.
and then get rid of that space, this is how it is in the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth.
Okay.
Now, here's the other thing, and this is the reason that they're asking, well, um why didn't, he started, oh crap. Let me repaste that in. Why didn't he start it with Aleph? Well, look what that word is. Father. Aleph in Bet is father.
Father God created the heavens and the earth.
Yep. But when you put it together, the translation is first God created the heavens and the earth.
Yeah. So what does this mean to you?
So, well, what I was going to show you is, let me jump back over here.
I see how it slightly changes the meaning a little bit, but yet
It's the
still
same
say,
connotation. It's the same
yeah,
essence, but it just
yes.
changing it.
Yeah, it's just a slight variation, but it's saying the same thing.
Yep. So this is where I'm going to tie this into 2058 and the event that I'm talking about. The very first word of Genesis 1:1 is Bereshit. Okay. It means Genesis. It means in the beginning. That one word in of itself is telling us what God's intentions are. So when you take the first 3 letters of this word, it makes up the word created. We know this because, let me zoom in on this. Crap. So if you look Bet, Resh, Aleph, it's the exact same letters of the second word. And that second word means created. So so we have created out of the first three letters. And then if we take the last three letters, it makes up a word which means set in place or make stationary. And then the first three letters again have an alternate meaning. It means to cut down.
I see that.
And then if you take the first two letters and the last two letters and you eliminate the middle two, it makes up the word covenant. And
Yeah.
then the middle two letters by themselves make up the word fire.
Fire.
And then if you take just all the letters except for the first letter, it makes up the word head or first fruit. And then if you take the first letter and the last two letters, it makes up the word house. And then the first two letters on their own mean son, S-O-N. So this very first word is telling us that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He set them in place or made them stationary, but he means to cut them down using a covenant of fire. And that covenant of fire will be the head of his house, his first fruit, his son. And that's all in just the first word.
There's a prophecy embedded in this.
That's right. And in 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 7, it literally states in the surface text of the Bible, by the same word the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of the ungodly. Now think about that. By the same word.
Yeah.
What word? That first word, Bereshit. By the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire. Why is that doing that? There we go. By the same word in which everything was created, is the same word in which everything will be destroyed. And therefore,
Brilliant.
the beginning is the end,
And
and the end is the beginning.
wow. Brilliant. Now I see where this has led you.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all come together.
There's also another hidden message right here that I'll just say very quickly. This word right here in the middle, this stupid thing. I don't know why it keeps doing that.
I was
It
not expecting this to come together
in the
like
way that it
this.
has. Yeah.
Yes, this is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. This word right here in the middle that's red, it's Aleph and Tav. Okay. It's an
Mhm.
untranslatable word. Untranslatable. But what you're seeing is Aleph and Tav. It's the first and last letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end.
Mm.
It also is representing everything in between. You have Aleph, the first letter, and Tav, the last letter. It encompasses the entire alphabet. And so it's also telling us that in the beginning, God created what first? Not the heavens and the earth. He created the alphabet. He created the code.
And yes, and a lot of the little hidden messages that we've seen leading up to this point to that as well.
Yep.
A lot of these numbers in gematria talk about God code, the God matrix. I am God in the whatever.
Yep.
We've seen that being told to us up to this point in little phrases, little numerical codes. It's incredible.
Exactly. And the final thing I'll say to wrap this up is the whole thing with the Tesseract led me to start looking at cubing and squaring the numbers. I had never thought to do that before because what is the Tesseract? It is a cube. So it got my mind thinking. Now, the Torah, the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible, is made up of 304,805 letters. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to square that number, and by squaring it, we would have this. So 304,805 letters going across, 304,805 letters going up.
Mm-hmm.
And when you square a number, basically what you're doing is you're taking that number and multiplying it times itself. So 304,805 times 304,805 is 92,906,088,025. There is another code that is running through this that instructs us to add the numbers separated by the commas. And what number do you think we're going to get?
I'm gonna just go off on a limb and say 1111.
You are absolutely correct. 92 plus 906 plus 88 plus 25 is 11.
1111.
11.
Amazing. This is why people, I think, are would do well to get your book, right? Because it seems like there's infinite connections tied to this. Like you've made some massive, massive connections, but it seems like this just kind of keeps going, right? There's just more things to be discovered with all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I have over 63. I think it's 63. I think I did my 63rd video this week. And now, granted, not all 63 are on this. I have about 5 or 6 that where I demonstrate my ITC research of spirit photography
Mm-hmm.
using a method called hydromancy or scrying. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so I have about, like I said, 5 or 6 videos showing that, but everything else is strictly devoted to this code. And it's just my process, from beginning to where I'm at the moment. And I've stumbled along the way. I've made mistakes along the way, which I've gone back and corrected myself. But it's those mistakes were meant to happen, just like the one with the binary code and coming across that Security Exchange Commission. Those types of mistakes were meant to happen.
Yeah.
But it clearly shows and demonstrates to me that everything is a number.
Yeah.
Everything is a number. And when you really start diving into this and exploring this, you start to see visually and realize that this is a simulation, because who could have put something as intricately encoded? Who could have done this?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. 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 It's almost like the movie The Matrix too, where you see Neo go into that room and he talks to the architect.
Yep.
And it's just completely over everybody's head. But the sense that you get is that this guy coded the essence of life
Yep.
and
Well,
brought forth, the existence.
exactly. Well, I have connected this to those movies. And in fact, the last Matrix film that came out, there's a lot of things that people I don't think quite captured, but I was paying attention. Like there's certain signs on the top of the buildings, like Sabora Mirde. It means, I think it means taste of shit.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, why is that on top of a building, like a neon sign
Mm-hmm.
in Spanish? Why is that there? And then she's sliding down, I think, another sign at one point, and that sign says, for those who love to eat shit or something like that. I mean, there's all these different things. And it's like, what? And so
Yes.
in my book, I literally, I couldn't show pictures because of copyright issues, but I'm explaining to people, go to this time frame in the movie and pause it, and you will see the sign. Then go to this time point and pause it and look at the sign.
Hmm.
So I'm instructing them where to go. After I did that, I said, let's add up those time values. And the number that we get is it's 1444, if I remember correctly. Well, when you stop and think about it, 1444 is simply 1111 plus 333.
Yeah, this goes on. I can see that. I can see that there are infinite amounts of connections to be discovered here. Garrick King, you have brought thunder and lightning.
I
This
love doing this. I love showing people this information and one of the things that people always say during podcasts or usually at the end of a podcast is like, "Man, you have just blown my mind." And I literally come back to them with, "Do you realize that the phrase mind blowing has the value of 1111?"
and I almost said it. I thought it. Yeah, this is a lot to chew on. And yes, it did blow my mind. So I've tapped into the 1111 over here.
Well, don't be surprised if you start seeing that number show up because it's happened numerous times. I've gone on podcasts and then people start messaging me and saying, "Hey, I just started seeing this number. It's showing
Yeah.
up," and they're sending me screenshots of every time that they see it now.
Yeah.
But it's like an awakening. It's awakening something in people, and then they start seeing the numbers as well.
Incredible. I'd like to keep talking, but when I do these video podcasts and I get to that 3 hour mark, things just start getting a little wonky. I don't want to run the risk of losing anything or what have you.
Yep. Nope. Perfectly
So
understood.
I do appreciate you coming on. This is a mind bender, and you're on to something. I mean, some of the codes I've seen that you've uncovered, they're pointing back to the ancient texts, and I'm sure that there's a technology involved with this. And I think that there are technologies that were made from these codes, especially when you go back to the Vedic square. The Vedic text, they have um construction manuals for how to build an anti-gravity craft using mercury ferrofluid vortex engines.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of these codes we've talked about today go back to UFOs, for lack of a better word, ancient anti gravity craft, and much, much more. So we're going to have to continue this. But for now, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you and your book?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is on Amazon. It's available in Kindle, paperback, and hardback. It's called the 1111 Matrix Code. Um, so that's on Amazon. And then I have my YouTube channel, which is also called 1111 Matrix Code Revealed. And then if people want to reach out to me, they can send me an Instagram message on Instagram using my channel there, which is 1111 underscore matrix underscore code. I was giving out my email address for a while, but like I said, I had 40,000 emails at one time and I could not reply to everybody. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Shout out to a couple new patrons, Andy, Dave. Thanks for joining up. If you want some extra contact, check out my Patreon. It's Tim Constantine, patreon.com. I'll leave the link there. I will also include the links for my guest here. As always, break the mold, conquer the realm, and thanks for listening.